Good morning, Deedi.
Hi.
I've been so excited for this conversation because I think what you and the entire brand and marketing team at Ellevest have done with a subject that can be very scary, but is so important, financial literacy, especially for women. We are in March 2022 in Women's History Days, International Women's History Days coming up. So I'm just for many reasons, excited about us having this conversation.
Yeah.
So, Deedi, why don't we start with how content strategy has evolved at Ellevest since you joined as a long-form writer. For those of us who don't know Deedi, she is the senior editor and content strategist for the education product at Ellevest, which is just a huge pillar of really all of the editorial and long-form content that the company produces. So what did content strategy look like when you joined a few years ago, and what does it look like today?
So I've been at Ellevest for almost 4 years now. I was brought on as an SEO writer. I was the number 2 hire on the editorial team. And so first of all, I would be remiss to not mention that Ellevest content strategy has evolved with the help of a whole team of extremely talented people that I'm really lucky to work with and learn from. And I've gotten the wonderful chance to watch it evolve and change, like with that team beside me the whole time. So that said, probably over the past 4 years, the greatest evolution that we've seen is our expansion into new formats and topics of content and editorial content, educational content, what have you, as the Ellevest brand and product experience has changed over 4 years. I joined 2 years after the company launched, and so that's 2/3 of the company's entire life cycle so far. And so when I started, we were essentially just a digital investing platform. And we had our online magazine, which is a lot like blog content. And we had 1 newsletter a week called What the L. And now we have not only the magazine and 3 newsletters, but also we have, in addition to our online investing platform, a full service wealth management offering, which expanded us into, a whole different audience. We also have a banking service that's very intentionally designed. We have one-on-one coaching and an incredible array of money coaches and certified career coaches who are subject matter experts for all of the educational content that we put out. And then we have a bunch of resources, like you mentioned. So we have email courses and downloadable worksheets and live webinars. And so there's just a lot more of it, sort of coming out. And people have always come to Ellevest. So Ellevest is built by women for women. And people have come to us to learn about money and investing and career success from a brand that's approachable and friendly, and we will never talk down to you, and we will not use a bunch of jargon. And essentially we are just not and will never be your father's financial advisor. And we did that very, very intentionally from the very beginning. And so as we've expanded into these new formats and audiences and types, we have needed to hold on to that brand voice and the tone that people come to us for, whether you're reading an article online or listening to a career coach teach you about how to do a resume in a live workshop, and so on and so forth. So that's probably the first big evolution. And then the second that I would say is that we have learned so much from our audience over the course of the last 4 years. We've really brought our community. Ellevest's community is an incredible group of women and non-binary folks and other people who really resonate with our mission of getting more money in the hands of women. And we learn from them, but we also feature them and we celebrate their wins publicly. And we learned a lot from them, I would say, also during the pandemic that we just went through. And that's probably the third big evolution, because before the pandemic, the economy was really strong and our community was really optimistic. And then all of a sudden, overnight, everything flipped on its head and people lost their jobs and people were really afraid about the stock market volatility and they needed to cut back their budget. And so we had to find a way to still have that strong brand voice while having a completely different tone and helping people get the resources that they needed, because they needed us. And so I think that our audience helped us become a much more empathetic content and brand overall during that time period that has only made our content and brand stronger in the time since.
Oh, I love that. I love that so much. Early on, as a follow-up to this question, early on, how did you come up with the brand attributes for your voice, and how did you turn that into language?
Yeah, that's sort of a philosophical question, I think, because, I think it stems from, being a mission-oriented startup. So our CEO and founder, Sally Krawcheck, likes to talk about how one day she was putting her mascara on and she had this sort of like aha moment where because she was a Wall Street like titan, honestly, I would call her that. And she realized that like the financial services industry was built by men for men, and that they were just leaving women behind. And so that's how Ellevest was born. And so from the very beginning, we knew that the way that we talked about investing, the way that we talked about career, the way that we talked about money had to be different, because nobody had cracked this code, so to speak, on how to talk to women, which like as women, we were like, well, we know how to talk to women. It's not that hard. We just have to be human beings and, meet them where they are. And like, I think that it started there, and over time has really grown. We have a full, really intentionally designed, inclusive, intersectional style guide that has been built over the course of many years and with the help of many people at the organization that we rely on every single day. And that is what makes not only content, but our brand what it is. Because if we didn't have, that focus on empathy and relatability, and something that we like to call internally fact-based SaaS, right? Where we know we have the data and we will tell you like it is, and we may be a little bit sassy, but ultimately, we are there for you, and that's what makes the brand and our content what it has been able to become today.
Deedi, how did you go about helping take that style guide to the whole company? How do you train people on it?
That's sort of like the ultimate question, right? And I think that that's where the journey that like ultimately led me to writer started, because earlier this year, we brought on to our team our very first creative project manager. And so she introduced a lot of processes and new systems that exposed some inefficiencies and ultimately bottlenecks like in the content creation and in the brand creative system overall. And so we had a bunch of legacy knowledge that was living only in certain people's brains, right? People who had been there for years and had really internalized the brand voice and could, correct those inclusive style guide usage choices, in their sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had some people who had only done certain types of projects. So we needed to find a way to be able to train like more people on the style guide more quickly, and also release those bottlenecks. And then at the same time, make it possible for anyone on the team to be able to work, who had capacity to work on different projects, not just the person who had done that before. And so, at one point we only had 2 writers who could edit, right? So we had people who could do copy editing, but we only had 2 people who could do like an editorial brand voice edit. And so we really had that bottleneck. But because we have such a commitment to the style guide and to the brand voice, the answer was not taking editing out of the process. It was, how can we make the editing process more efficient? How can we make it so that we're not correcting the same small mistakes, and empowering other people on our team to be able to do really iterative, like, low stakes copy that we could learn from in a way that everybody felt confident in and knew would represent the brand well. So that is what ultimately led me to writer. And I just knew when I saw on your homepage the text editor in action in that GIF, I was like, I need this yesterday. And that's what kicked off our journey.
I love that, Deedi. How did you go about thinking about the tooling? It's not the most where this is an early market, and so thinking about I need a tool for my style guide isn't
Yep.
like the first thing that comes to people's minds. We're hoping to change that. But what was the thought process, and how did you think about tooling?
Yeah, that's a great question. So as a startup, we're scrappy, and we have to be really intentional with the tools and the resources that we choose to put in our team's budget, because they have to make a difference. Like they just have to. And so they either have to help us influence and hit our goals directly, or they have to help us use our time more efficiently so that we can do more work to help hit those goals. And it has to be something that we can feel sure will do one of those two things. And that second one, especially, is top of mind for the editorial team, because we're expecting to grow more in the next couple of years than we have in the past couple of years. And we want to be able to build best in class financial education for as many people as possible, as efficiently as we can. And so that's the lens that I was using as I started to explore new tools and new resources that we might feel were a sure bet to add into our stack, if you will.
Cool. I love that. How did you go about tying the impact of writer to your business outcomes, and what was getting writer approved like?
Yeah. So there are a couple of things are really helpful for me, because one thing is that I'm very, very fortunate as a content marketer and as a writer that I have never had to prove the value of content to my organization. I work for a company that understands the value of content inherently. And so, in fact, we actually have the opposite problem, where we have to be really judicious in which projects we choose to take on and what makes it into our roadmap, because we just don't have time, for everything. And so, as I mentioned, I was already sort of getting questions about, like, how are we going to scale content and writing and the Ellevest voice in a future where we expect to grow? My manager literally said to me, like, how are you going to train writers when we hire them in months and not years? And so when I found Writer, I said, this is how I'm going to do that. Basically, I was like, this is the answer, that we were looking for, because ultimately we have like a North Star of our overall company goals that help us choose those projects. And being able to take on more projects more efficiently is going to allow us to prioritize the things that really matter, and like get those things into the content calendar, right? So we start with our overall company goals that like exist across the entire organization as a North Star. And then we look at like data, right? We look at like what our audience and our community is really asking us for. We use Instagram polls, we use surveys, we use keyword research. We really want to make sure that we are pulling in what people need and want from us to make data informed decision, both qualified and quantitative. Quantitative and qualitative. And then we get like, more granular with things like target click rates for the newsletter and page views on our magazine. But those goals are set based on, one level above goals for things like acquisition and audience engagement. And then those ladder back up to those ultimate company goals, which are things like, costs and revenue, et cetera. And so being able to be really efficient and present a tool that could literally pay for itself in the amount of time that it was saving our team and our editors, even by very conservative estimates, was sort of a no-brainer. And as soon as we were able to do that, I think it was just a natural fit, and we were ready to go forward.
Cool. Love that. What were some of the successes in the rollout?
So I think that our biggest success, as you can probably guess because I have started to talk about it already, is the text editor. Rolling that out, we have people from multiple parts of the organization across. It has really allowed us to feel more comfortable and more confident in the things that the things that are low stakes, that don't go through an intense editorial process. And it's allowed that editorial process that we do follow to be more efficient and have so that we can focus on things like, is this structured the right way? Or have you like left people with more questions than you've answered for them, rather than, you should have a hyphen here, et cetera, which are like, they matter, but they take up more time, I think, than they wait. And so the text editor has just been absolutely huge for us, especially because we do almost everything in Google Docs. And so having it right there, and then the Figma plugin was a game changer as well. And then the other thing I would say that was a success for us is snippets, which I think we have sort of a unique approach to snippets, in that their primary value to us is in our disclosures practice. And so Ellevest is a registered investment advisor. We follow strict compliance regulations for marketing and advertising as set by the SEC. And so there are disclosures for like sort of everything. So like if we talk about diversification, then we have this disclosure. If we mention our banking product, then we have this disclosure. And then there are standard disclosures. And then if we run a sale or a promo code, then that has a disclosure. And so having the ability for those to be right in the sidebar as we're writing a document, so that we can just quickly copy and paste them into everything, it's helped us make sure that we are being more compliant, and it's just made everything more efficient.
On compliance and snippets, how did legal react to you saying, hey, we've got a tool for compliance language now?
So our compliance team at Ellevest is also very small but mighty. And so one thing that is very inherent to our overall company compliance policy is that everyone at the company is responsible for compliance in some way, shape, or form. And so they have really given us the tools and information that we need to make sure that everybody's aligned on that front. And so the more tools that we have to so you can think of our compliance team almost like you might think of like our brand editors, right? So they are reviewing marketing copy that falls under this jurisdiction. And so if we can eliminate the small things that they correct all the time, or make sure that we have those disclosures available to us to use right away, that makes their job much more efficient. That makes them feel more confident in the things that we have to turn around quickly that can't always go through a lengthy review process. So having the tools and information right in front of people instead of having to dig for them, they were so on board.
Oh, that is so awesome, Deedi. Has there been pull for writer in corners of the organization that you weren't expecting?
That's a tough challenge, because my vision was for every single person to eventually have writer. So I don't think that I would have been surprised to hear anybody asking for it, but we did have a couple of people get pulled through. So some folks from our customer experience team, as they were rewriting, frequently asked questions and response macros in their system. That was something that we added pretty quickly. We had members of our private wealth management operations team who were sending out, RFP responses that we were able to set them up. Our director of acquisition, who leads ads, was working with, her partner team, and they were able to iterate more quickly by using the text editor. So I would love for everybody to have it, but we started with a much smaller group in terms of just sort of like the marketing and content teams, and then expanded it sort of as people showed that they needed it. And I'm excited about that, because I think that as we grow, that's just evidence that, this will be really helpful.
Awesome. Who do you all have writing in Figma as mostly a longer form company? How has the content that gets iterated on in Figma played into the content strategy?
Yeah, so I lead a very small but mighty editorial team. And so we are essentially, as you mentioned, responsible for long form content, editorial content, educational content, things like that. We are part of a broader brand creative team. So that also includes the brand copywriting and strategy team, as well as the brand design team. And I partner really closely with both those teams every single day, as well as our social team, because they also are doing a lot of, copy with captions and things like that. There's a lot of repurposing and campaign collaboration that happens with everything we do and makes everything that we do so much stronger. And we really we blend a lot, right? So for example, if we're working on, say we're working with our career coaching team on a workshop on interviewing fundamentals, the editorial and long form team is going to take lead on the slides and the script copy. The brand design team is going to do the slide design, and the brand copywriting team is going to help us promote that with everything from product descriptions to marketing emails. And so we all sort of have to be on the same page about what this thing is and how it works. And so, as I mentioned, a lot of the things that we work on starts in a document with a copy deck, a copy brief, and we do most of our approvals process in that document. And once something, alongside that, we'll have design and usually brand copy working with design in Figma to make sure that we have obviously all the copy fits and that things are working seamlessly together. And those things inform back and forth. But where writer comes in to play in the Figma process is as we start to get towards the end of that process, it's just sort of a really great catch-all to make sure do we have anything that slipped our tired eyeballs on this piece of content, that we've all been staring at for a week or more? Are there any, translation issues in copy and pasting from the copy document? And so it's almost just like a security blanket as we are finalizing things that go out into the world.
Got it. I love it. Who uses the Figma plugin?
I think everyone on the brand marketing team who uses Figma has access to the Figma plugin, but it's mostly the brand copywriting and strategy team who work in that app.
Got it. What's been the feedback generally from them?
I think, similar to what I just said, where it's just really nice to know that they've got a reliable, juiced up spell check that includes Ellevest's legitimate style guide, right? I think that's the piece that takes it from a nice to have to something that feels just really critical, is that these are the decisions that we've made collectively about how we want to write and be perceived and how we want to serve our community in the best way possible. And so having that there for them in the end of the process makes everybody feel more confident and more ready to send something out into the world.
Cool. I love that so much. One of the things that makes me so sad, but also is the energy for us to bring writer to as many teams as possible is seeing really, really smart folks like yourself work on really figuring out the language that's going to resonate with the audience and move them to action, but then it's not consistently applied because it's really hard. Human training is the hardest thing.
Yeah, and it's always changing.
Yeah, it's always changing.
It's always changing, and that it's not even just that language itself evolves, which is a nerdy tangent that I won't go on at the moment, but the way that we talk about intersectionality and social initiatives that resonate with the world, they change, week to week, moment to moment. Our social team at Ellevest is, first of all, absolutely incredible. Everyone I work with at Ellevest is incredible, but they really have their ear to the ground with their heart and their brains behind making sure that we're putting the most empathetic, most heart-forward brand forward as we can. And so, but that's not something that we would necessarily be able to loop the whole company in on without a tool, right? So if, this one word has evolved, then that's one way that it changes a lot over time. But then also just as we learn what performs well for us, right? As we learn what, resonates with people, and as we get feedback from our community about what they not only want to hear, but what makes them feel seen and what makes them feel connected to the Ellevest brand, then we can build that into the editor in a way that encourages anyone who's writing anything to adopt those best practices so that we're all united and ready to do our best by our community.
Cool. I love that. Any words or phrases that you've realized really resonate with the community, or make them feel empowered or engage them more, that you've included over time?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's something that has been really interesting and resonant for us lately. Although I don't necessarily have a specific phrase related to this, though, but I think we're all witnessing sort of the end of the girl boss era. And so the way that, we might once have cheered on our community now might feel and look a little bit different. And those are subtle things that happen in like the subconscious, right? And so we've been doing a lot of thinking about that and just making sure that we're not accidentally like falling back on the kinds of phrases that we maybe cut our teeth on as we started out, as like a for women brand, to make sure that we are evolving and like with as the individual people on the team also evolve that way, right? And so that's been top of mind lately, but there will be more examples for sure, as the world evolves.
I love that so much, Deedi, and the sophistication and the maturity of an audience or a product evolves together, and then it's reflected in the language. So key. What has been the impact to the business of content strategy specifically? And I love that you're really born as a content first, content's important company. That's so huge. And this is actually a really common theme in our spotlights, talking to early adopters. I mean, you all being at the intersection of content and scale is very new. So you're at the vanguard, and almost everyone says like 50% of the job was my leadership, believing in this and believing in me.
Yes.
So I love that for content in general. Specifically, content strategy as the discipline is newer, even within content orgs. What has been the business impact of a unified content strategy across the company that you've been able to see or quantify?
Yeah, I mean, again, like I'm in a really lucky position to be at a company where content, the whole company believes in the necessity and the power of content, not only to hit company goals, but to achieve our mission of getting more money in the hands of women, right? Ellevest was started by women for women. We will say that all day, every day. And it couldn't have begun without content, because in the early days of Ellevest, I know that the team who came together to build it, they spent hundreds of hours of user testing, talking to women about how they felt about not only the financial services industry, but also their own finances and their own career. And they learned a lot of really foundational things that we have relied on to guide how we best help women get more money. And so they didn't want the jargon. They didn't want to be talked down to, right? Like they also, there's a perception out there that women are risk averse when it comes to investing. And our research has shown that that's actually not true. Women are much more aware of risk. They want to understand the risk. They want to go a little bit slower. They don't, necessarily want to be told like, oh, trust me, like this is a hot stock, or like, oh, trust me, Bitcoin, yada, yada, yada. They want to understand those things before they just sort of like jump in. And we were like, same, right? We are right there with you. And so content and education and editorial, everything from long form on the magazine to today's live webinars that we conduct to our, Instagram feed, which is just such an asset and such a beautiful community that our social team has built, is founded on that desire to help people get more money in a way that is going to resonate with our community and learning from them what they want. And so I think that we've evolved an entire educational experience once you become an Ellevest member, and we have grown our coaching service from just one-on-one, individual career and financial planning services to group coaching and like I mentioned, live webinars and like these things that really blend content in terms of a script and a slide or take home resources in a way that like feels seamless, right? You've got from a quote that you see on our Instagram feed to the article that we link to in the bio to like the webinar that you sign up at the end of that article is all content, but it's all so much more. And so it's hard for me to answer your question with a direct response of content has led to these results or content has driven like this many whatever, because content is infused into the brand and has been just a wonderful place for me to work and learn from my teammates as we have built something that I think is really special and exciting and makes me like love what I do.
Oh, I love that. That's so inspiring.
I mean, we don't get me wrong, at a startup, things are pretty chaotic, but at the end of the day, everybody at the Ellevest team is there for the same reason, and it just makes the world of difference.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. I definitely understand a mission-driven company. I love that, Deedi. What do you think the discipline of content strategy evolves to over the next few years?
It's going to sound like something that people already do, but like learning from your audience, taking what they really need and are asking for, and doing your best to serve the community what is going to be most helpful for them, because ultimately that's what's most helpful for everyone. And so I think that, there's like sort of this tension that exists when you're selling something in general between what does the company need and what does the audience need and what does the community need, and where you can find those things come together. Like we would not be the brand that we are without the Ellevest community and everything that they have taught us and built the brand alongside us. And so I don't think that's going anywhere. I think that apps can come and go, platforms can come and go, video can come and go, whatever it is, like if you have a pulse on the people whose lives matter to you as a brand and as a person who's working for that brand, you will be led in the direction that you should
go. Anything that I didn't ask where there's something that you think would be a really big part of the story, or even a smaller part, but an interesting one?
I feel excited to have the tools and resources to dream about building like a best in class educational and editorial team and brand and experience for our community. I want us to keep helping women and non-binary people get more money and live the lives that they like really dream of. I want us to keep helping people use their money to change the world through impact investing or whatever it is that aligns their values and their finances, that we can all participate in wallet activism. I want to give people, the tools and information that they need to live the life they want. And I want more content teams to look like ours does, which is so many smart and passionate women making content that resonates with our community in a way that changes their lives.
Definitely, that just all resonates with me so much. Women need to pay more capital gains tax. More of the capital fucking gain.
No, I mean, exactly, right? I think that I think we're just at, it feels like we've, our whole lives have been at like sort of an inflection point for women. But, we're not there yet. And so the more we push and the more that we keep each other in mind, the more we can change the way that things are.